Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you about van life. A couple times in my life, I retired and sold everything or stored everything and got into an RV and took off down the road. And it was some of the happiest times of my life. The first time I was living in Branson, Missouri, and which is a retirement community, a vacation retirement community. And I would watch these people come into town, older folks, driving 37-foot RVs and whatnot, and having the time of their life, really. Seeing shows in Branson, going to dinner, buying things for the grandkids, staying in resorts and golfing or fishing or doing whatever it was they did. And really having a swell time of it. But I also noticed a darker trend. They would maybe be doing that for 2 or 3 years, and then health complications would set in. A lot of times the male of the couple would die, and his widow would be left with this 37-foot RV that she either didn't want to drive or couldn't drive, or felt she couldn't drive. And they would sell them cheap. And everyone would say, "Oh, too bad. Joe just retired 2 years ago, and he was wanting to go to Yosemite and see the Grand Canyon, and he wasn't able to, but they had a couple good years on the road, and I heard this story in various changes and details over and over again, and I thought, what a shame. Gosh, I don't want that to happen to me. I mean, that's something I've always wanted to do since I was a little kid. In the 4th grade, I wrote a story about getting in a van and hitting the road and seeing the world. What started that story was my teacher, Mrs. Joyce Pyle, had asked us to write a story about what we would do if we knew the world was ending in a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever it was. And my story was about procuring a van at the ripe age of 9 or 10 and hitting the road to see the country. And I just loved it. Loved the idea. Fast forward to my early 20s, late teens, and I bought a Volkswagen camper with just this exact idea in mind, was to get in that Volkswagen camper and travel. But if any of you have ever owned a Volkswagen camper and were not mechanically inclined, like I am not, the idea of traveling the world or traveling the country in a Volkswagen camper is daunting. I had trouble upon trouble with that Volkswagen camper. I loved it. It was red with a white pop top, and it had been owned by a wood carver in Branson, Missouri, and he had carved little elves in the doors of the cupboards in the van. And his name was Pete Engler. And I loved that van, but that van was a constant project. So I didn't hit the road in it. I mean, I hit the road in it around the Ozarks, but I didn't go out and see the world. So 10 years later, 15 years later, something like that, I bought another Volkswagen van. And the idea was I was going to go with my girlfriend at the time. We were going to go to San Francisco. I was going to go back out to San Francisco. She was going to go with me. We were going to live in that Volkswagen camper in the Bay. Well, and that Volkswagen camper was the first one was 1970 or 71. This one was a 75, 74. And this one was a white pop top. And I dearly loved it. But mechanically, cosmetically, it was much better than the other one. The red one had all kinds of rust on it. But the white one, the body was in really good shape. But everything else was bad. The wiring, the engine, the transmission, everything was bad. And so I never traveled in that Volkswagen camper outside of the Ozarks again. So, but the dream never died. So fast forward another 20 years. And I see what's going on in Branson. We have a glass shop there, and I see these people wanting to do what I've wanted to do, and then he dies. And I turned to my wife at the time and I said, why do we wait? Why wait until we get that old and one of us is going to die? Probably me. Men statistically die sooner than women. Make of that what you will. But why wait? And I can make glass, blow glass, little hummingbirds and little hummingbird earrings and roses and flowers and things on the road. We can make a living on the road, and we can travel. And we won't have all of the overhead we have of a traditional business and the upkeep of a household and everything else. And so I sold her on the idea, maybe, and maybe not. Maybe she just gave in to me. And I bought a Class C RV. And we downsized, sold a lot of things, gave a lot of things away, and stored a lot of things. And we hit the road. Mistake number one. We hit the road in February. And in the Ozarks that year, it was in the negatives. So I think the first night we spent in the van, I think it was -8. I don't know. Anyway, I loved it. And my wife at the time, not so much. But she was a good sport for a while. We ended up traveling with several craft show promoters, and we would set up in malls or convention centers and that kind of thing. And we traveled with a group of people, crafters that were living in vans or RVs. I was in a Class C RV. And we would get together in the evenings after we left the mall, after the mall closed, and we would have a cookout, and someone would bring potato salad, and someone would bring the hamburgers, and someone would bring the 5-cup marshmallow salad, and we'd sit around and talk and complain about business and where we're going to go to next, and the promoter didn't do enough to promote the show, and they're not earning their money, and yada, 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 yada. But it was good times. Until it wasn't. And one show, we were in Enid, Oklahoma. Now, Enid, Oklahoma kind of got its fame from the movie called Tornado or Tornadoes or Twister. It was Twister, that's what it was. Twister was filmed in Enid, Oklahoma, and for good reason. Enid gets tornadoes more than almost any other place, I think. And during that show, we got a tornado. Now, all of the vendors, all the crafters were all parked in RVs out in the parking lot. And a lot of people, they throw out their a carpet and an awning and have patio furniture and a grill. I didn't do all that because I like to keep mobile, But we were out there. And the storm came up, and it was vicious. Now, this was before cell phones and, any kind of any kind of digital warning system that we rely on now. And it was getting bad. And then the tornado sirens went off, and the wind was howling, and the van was rocking, the RV, and it was my wife and I and 3 cats, and in a 24-foot Class C RV. Wow. Anyway, and for me that was luxury. But we were worried, but there was no place to go. We couldn't get into the mall. There was no place to go. And if there was something close by, we didn't know about it, and we couldn't have found it in the racket that the storm was producing. So we were concerned. But, and then pretty soon, the Enid Police Department came through on the loudspeaker. Abandon your vehicles. A tornado is on the ground and heading this direction. Abandon your vehicles. And I thought, abandon what? And go where? You know, you didn't offer an option there, you know? And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to drive around to the other side of the mall. We were camped on the west side of the mall and drove around to the east side of the mall and snug up against a corner of the building where 2 walls of the RV would be against the back wall, and the side wall would be up in this corner of the building. And I thought that would afford us as much protection as we could possibly get. And so we got dressed accordingly and put our shoes on and hoped for the best. My wife was a nervous wreck. I can't say that I wasn't worried, because I was, but you know, oh well. And luckily for us, for the mall, and for the town of Eden, it as it approached the mall, it jumped over the mall and really jumped over the town, and that part of the town anyway, and came back down out in the county, where it did some damage to multiple barns and things like that. But no one was hurt, no lives were lost, and it was a good-sized tornado. But it wasn't on the ground for long. And so the next morning we go in there, and my wife says, "That's it, we're going home." And I said, okay. And she said, "Go talk to the mall management, make sure we can get into the building if this happens again." I'm like, okay. And so I did, and they had storms, but no bad storms. But that took me off the road. So fast forward another 10 or 15 years. Time flies, wow. And I'm divorced, and probably for good reason, I don't know. But anyway, and I think, I had a store in Eureka Springs, and I thought, I'm tired of a store. I don't want to have a store anymore. I'm tired of it. I called it my little glass prison. And I said, I want to get on the road again. And so I didn't buy an RV this time, because I was just really unsure of that. And I really wanted to simplify things. And I always dreamed, since that 4th grade story, about living in a van. So I bought a Ford Econoline club wagon, 1997, I think, or 95. Anyway, late 90s. And took out the seats and built a bunk out of 2x4s and plywood, and built a taller table out of 2x4s and plywood, and then a smaller table to cook on out of 2x4s and plywood, and put all kinds of screws in it to hold it together, and put a bunk in there, and painted it all gunmetal gray. The van was gray on the outside, dark gray, and it was gray on the inside, and my bedding was gray, and everything was gray, and I loved it. And you can see videos about the Kraken on the channel. And closed the store, gave everything away, sold everything, threw a lot of things away. And in the years between the first retirement and the second retirement, I had amassed storage units full of stuff. Just crazy amounts of stuff. It took me almost a full year to divest of all of that stuff. I gave to so many do-gooder stores that they said, please, no more. We can't take any more, no more. And I was doing this in 3 states. Anyway, so I moved into this van, and I had hoped that my mentor would travel with me. His wife had died, my mentor in the glass business, and he had a motorhome. And I said, Jerry, come on, let's go. And he was supposed to go with me on a Mother's Day show to Manhattan, Kansas, a mall I would do up there. And he couldn't do it. So I left without him, and I went to Manhattan, Kansas, and did a Mother's Day show, and then I headed out to the Pacific Northwest. And I traveled around out there, traveled down the coast a little bit, ended up coming back to the Ozarks, and then snagging my mentor the following Christmas, and he left with me then in his RV. He was in his RV, I was in my van, and we did a Christmas show up in Manhattan where we set up and made glass. And then after Christmas, he says, where are we going to go now? And they said, well, you've talked a lot about wanting to go down to Florida, and I'm game. You've talked a lot about wanting to go out west to Arizona, and I'm game. So why don't you choose? And he said, I don't know what to do. So we'd come back to the Ozarks from Kansas to pick up some things he had left in storage. And I said, well, I tell you what, in the morning when we leave, after breakfast, I'll follow you, and whichever way you turn, that's where we'll go. And so after breakfast, we got in our respective RVs, and me in my van, him in his 34-foot RV, Class C, and he turned west. So that meant we were going to Arizona. And we went out to the desert, and I had gone through that divorce, and so I needed some time, and I went to the desert. And Jerry went into town and set up in Quartzsite, Arizona is this mecca for nomads and RVers, people living in vans and cars and on tents and on motorcycles and all sorts of people. They have lots of Bureau of Land Management where you can camp for free for a while, in 21 days, I think. And so I camped on the Bureau of Land Management. They also have a lot of pop-up areas where vendors sell things. And my friend Jerry, my mentor, he set up, he was a glass blower, and he set up making glass in one of the little villages, tent villages. And I went to the desert to work some things through. And I loved it. It was just absolutely fantastic. And traveled around out west and ended up coming back to the Ozarks yet again. I was going to fill some wholesale orders I had with customers in Branson, Eureka Springs area and whatnot. And then I was going to head to Florida. And long story short, I met someone, COVID hit, and it changed our lives, changed my life for sure. And here I am in the Ozarks with a store and a house and all kinds of stuff yet again. I'm not a hoarder, I curate collections. But I said all that to say this. I know what it's like to live that life of freedom in a van down by the river. And in regards to my last video about retirement, that surely is an option for me, and it's something that I'm familiar with, and it is a fallback plan for me. You know, that is what I'll do if I can't do anything else, and maybe that's what I'll do even if I can do something else. But we'll see. Retirement's coming, and it's better to try and get ready as best we can. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, like and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. And we'll see you again later. God bless. Bye-bye.